Hello, everybody. Look at that. You won't see this for a few seconds, so it won't be as instantaneous for you as it just was for me. But the instant that I turned on my camera and turned on my microphone, I saw in the chat Dana saying TikTok Shives. So this will feel late to you, but to me, you know, it's a good lesson for general relativity. There are no privileged points of view. To you, it seems delayed by 30 seconds or so, but to me, from my vantage point on this end of the stream, it felt absolutely perfect. Anyway, hi everybody. Yes, take a bow, Dana. Take a bow. Hi Carlisle. Hi Dana. Hi Geek. Hi Stephen and David Colby and David C. Drake and everybody else in the chat. A couple of you I saw earlier and said hi to in the chat, but welcome everybody. Hey Kemp. So as always, I will be responding to questions that were sent in ahead of time from my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members. So if you are watching live and you're in the chat and you have a question for me there, or something you want me to talk about, or something you want me to see, or you're going to be generous and send in a super chat or anything like that, please hold on to it if at all possible until I get through the patron and member questions. And then I will spend the rest of the show hanging out with the live chat and we can talk about whatever you want. So yeah. It's my favorite drink that I know Dana really loves, the lemon lime flavored seltzer. So anyway, let's go to the patron and member, and also don't forget, after I get through the patron and member questions, but before I turn full time to the live chat, there will be the premiere of a brand new Stuffy short. So stay tuned for that as well after the patron and member question. So here we go. First patron and member question is from Dana, who was actually the first person to submit a question this time. Got the question in early. From Dana, who is now an even more experienced woman. Earlier this week, on my birthday, I posted a spirited journal video on Patreon about a tweet that crossed my timeline just that morning, actually, in addition to attacking/blaming teachers, because LOL, of course, it implied that using tampons when menstruating makes women, quote, worn out before they give birth. I agree that people who've gotten to this sort of point in their thinking are so far past the bounds of rationality that it is irrational to hope they'd ever return to it, and ineffective to spend resources, time, energy, etc., trying to make it happen. And it's more effective to mobilize those who are reasonable and to get them more active. My question then is, how do we do that? How do we find people who agree with us but are inactive or minimally involved? Once we do, what do we do about it? Research shows shame and blame isn't effective, and hopefully we wouldn't do that sort of thing anyhow. What suggestions do you have? Or, as folks around here like to say, thoughts? Yeah, all of my thoughts are very basic because I don't have a lot of specific expertise in this, but I think it would probably help to give those voters, those people who agree with us for the most part, but are apathetic toward voting, or not just, I mean, mostly voting, but other kinds of participation in the political system as well. Give them something to vote for. Give them a reason to have faith, to believe that their vote and their other forms of engagement in the system will actually be worth something, will yield results, will make things better, or at least has the real potential to make things better. Because I think that accounts for a lot of the disengagement. People don't get involved, or don't get involved as much as maybe they could, because they don't think it's worth it. They don't see the point. Maybe they think that both major parties are the same, and a vote for a Democrat isn't really that much better than a vote for a Republican. Maybe they think that it doesn't really make a difference either way because the current system isn't oriented to address the problems that they care about. Maybe they're just tired and they're just discouraged because they don't see things getting all that better in a lot of areas, despite paying attention to these problems for years and years and years, or it still doesn't feel like things are improving. I mean, I know for me personally, there are certain issues that are like that. Like if your major issue, if your major point of contact with our political culture is the issue of gun violence here in the United States, I totally understand having a, oh shit, what's the point attitude, because that's a problem that we've had for a very long time, that we've known how to fix for a very long time, and we just haven't done it, to the point that it kind of feels like a choice. And if you are someone who cares deeply about that issue and maybe doesn't have a broader political interest, your main interest is just that issue, I can understand feeling discouraged. Like, even though the rhetoric of Democrats is light years better than the rhetoric of Republicans, and even though Democrats talk a good game and say that there are all these things they would like to do if given the opportunity, that could address the problem. Either they don't ever get the opportunity, or they do get the opportunity, but there's always something else that they're working on instead, and they never actually ever get around to doing the gun control stuff, even if they theoretically could do it. So I understand, like, but if you want to reach out to those people and get them to come on to our side in an active way, we need to give them something to vote for. We need to give them a reason to believe that it makes a difference. I agree. I don't think shame and blame would work, but something positive. Give them a reason to think that their contribution would make a difference, and that it's worth it, that it's not just pointless, that it does matter, that their vote does count, and that it does make a difference which side wins these elections. Again, the specifics beyond that, I really don't have, but that's the general idea. Steve Crane, if you had the chance to change one thing in the U.S., what would it be? That's a really broad question. That really depends on how you interpret the question. Since I'm in a political mindset after Dana's question, I would say if I could change one thing, it would be to get rid of the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Yeah, because that has been used as a backstop to prevent gun control in this country for my entire life, and has also been used as a pretense to even get rid of some of the gun control policies that states and cities have enacted that have actually made sense and been making a difference. Those statutes have been struck down by courts who are more sympathetic to a strict constructionist rule, reading of the Constitution. And they say, oh, Second Amendment shall not be infringed. Sorry, can't have that law. So I would get rid of the Second Amendment tomorrow if I could. Yeah, there you go. That's a nice specific thing. I'm sure there's other things I can do. There's more broader things. I mean, if I could literally do anything, like, oh, get rid of poverty, give poor people more money. But if it's like an actual political change that could plausibly happen in a relatively short time, if there was the will to do it and I could just make it happen, and get rid of the Second Amendment. Oasis. Star Trek has gifted us, or attempted to gift us in some cases, with wonderful ideas for technological advancement over its lifetime. Some of them have been great, like the modern iPad/tablet. Others, not so much. Looking at you, Google Glass. Anyway, outside of warp drive, which probably won't happen in our lifetime, what's something you would like to see brought to life, if anything? Well, I mean, if it could be done in a way that was safe and would not just basically result in it being a murder machine, obviously, like the transporter would be great, or replicator technology, or maybe even something more basic, the energy source that allows transporters and replicators to function the way we see them functioning in Star Trek, which is fusion power. A lot of people don't realize it's been mentioned a few times in the shows. On the ships, of course, they mention the dilithium chamber and the matter antimatter reaction, and the matter antimatter reaction is supposedly what fuels the ship, right? But power on the ship, like electricity on the ship and presumably on Earth and other planets, is generated by fusion reactors. So fusion power, cold fusion, clean, renewable, virtually inexhaustible energy for everybody. The dream of Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man 2. That's what I would love to see. Next question is from Thomas James Wright, aka Black Body Economics. Steve, after watching some of your videos, my daughter and I decided to avoid any more Harry Potter purchases, which actually showed quite a lot of maturity on her part because she loves the Harry Potter stories. What I have not been able to wrap my mind around, however, is that some of my family members who are LGBTIQA+, don't seem to really care about Harry Potter or Chick-fil-A. They definitely understand the situation, and they have definitely been targeted by shittier than shitty humans. Recently, a loved one was nailed to the cross because a local bigoted cop had a problem with their driver's license having their dead name on it. Yet they bring Chick-fil-A home regularly. It's not like they don't know, and I am so not one to judge others' choices. I always ask myself if I should try to bring it up, but dude, I don't know. I feel like it's not even remotely my place. Am I missing something? Am I thinking about this all wrong? No. If anything, I think you're probably handling it well. I don't know if I were someone, if I were myself as a cis het white dude, and I had a lot of LGBTQ people in my family or in a circle of friends who were, doing things that a lot of other queer people that I know or have contact with think is harmful. um, I don't know if I would feel comfortable being the one to call them out on it either. I don't know. I would think the same thing. Like, I don't know if this is my place. Like, I have my opinions on this, but I don't know if I'm the one who should be saying this to them. So I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from. I don't really get it either. I think maybe the best answer is that maybe there are sometimes where maybe people are just exhausted by that stuff and they don't want to care. They see that as a burden that they are comfortable laying down and they just don't want to carry it. And they like Chick-fil-A food, which is another part of it that I find baffling. Like I've said before, like Chick-fil-A is the easiest boycott that I've ever participated in. When the first Chick-fil-A opened in my area, I went there. This was years before I even knew about the anti-gay stuff or anything. I went there the first week it was open just to try the food out of curiosity, because you always hear about, oh, the chicken sandwich is the best chicken sandwich ever. And I found the food utterly mediocre, even for fast food, and I never went back. So when it turned out that they were, horribly bigoted and intolerant toward gay people, that was an easy choice for me. I was like, oh, I'll just continue not eating there, So I don't even get what's so goddamn great about the food that, a queer person would be willing to overlook the long, ugly history of especially egregious corporate bigotry in the case of Chick-fil-A, to continue eating the food. But like I say, it's something that people like. Harry Potter, same thing. They love Harry Potter, or they love video games and they want to play the Harry Potter game. And it's like, it's just, they have an excuse that they accept that works for them. And it's something that they feel comfortable ignoring, even if they are involved and they do care about the larger issues. It's just something that they've decided for themselves that they're okay with. And, I mean, I don't really get it. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, but we all make our choices, and we don't have to respect each other's choices, but I mean, we have to respect each other's right to make those choices. And, like I say, I personally don't get it. I personally don't get it. I am offended enough by both J.K. Rowling and Chick-fil-A and their politics and their various, shitty social attitudes, that I felt like I had to stop giving them money, a while ago. And, just as someone who is not directly affected by it, just as someone who is troubled by that kind of intolerance being directed at any group, that is, based on their inborn characteristics, like that sort of bigotry and prejudice. It's not even a difficult choice for me. But for other people, they make a different choice, and it's their choice to make. So, but I definitely feel you on the, I feel like I should say something, but it's not my place. That's definitely where I would be coming from too. Kara Hughes, hi, Steve. I know you're not going to be asked to write a new Star Trek series. Well, pessimistic, Kara, geez. When you just say it like that. I know you're not going to be asked to write a new Star Trek series, but bearing in mind that you think that Star Trek should now do a show after TNG and Voyager, which characters do you think the writer should concentrate on? Should there be new starships like Lower Decks, or should we stick with another USS Enterprise with a completely different crew? Just a few crazy questions. Just wondered what you think. Yeah, I mean, I would love it if the next show, and they announced a couple days ago, I think just yesterday, in fact, they announced the next new show that's going into production, which is a Starfleet Academy show, which, if you read between the lines of the pitch that they included in their announcement, it sounds like it's going to be set in the era of Discovery in the 32nd century, because the premise is described as Starfleet Academy reopening its doors and accepting, applications from all over the galaxy for the first time in over a century, right? So it sounds like it's going to be set in the era of, in the recent era of Discovery in the 32nd century, when Starfleet and the Federation is greatly diminished and they're just starting to rebuild and kind of reach back out into the galaxy after a prolonged period of contraction. And hopefully that means it'll be most, if not all, brand new characters that we've never heard of. A lot of people are sort of assuming that Tilly will be in it, because that was where Tilly was going at the end of the last season of Discovery, when she was kind of sent off in a different direction. She was going to be going to the academy to become a teacher or something. And so it makes sense, given that, and given the fact that, they could set a Starfleet Academy show at any point in the franchise's history that they want. They're choosing to set it in the Discovery era in the 32nd century. And they've already set up Tilly as being, in that general area. So it would make sense for Tilly to be in the show. They haven't announced that yet. She may not be, but it's reasonable to speculate that Tilly might be in the show. And if that's true, that's completely fine with me. I love Tilly. But hopefully she's the only familiar character. Hopefully, other than Tilly, it's all new characters that we've never seen before, because that's what I think Star Trek really needs to do, like, from now on. And if they do a show beyond that, if they do another series after Starfleet Academy or in addition to it or whatever, I would love for it to be set on a ship we've never seen before. It could be another version of the Enterprise. It could be the Enterprise F or the Enterprise G or the Enterprise, whatever they decide to make it. Or it could be a completely different ship with a completely different name. I don't really care about that. But it should be characters we've never seen before. It should be all new characters. And the series should be about new stories and going forward and stuff that we've never heard about before and we've never seen on Star Trek before. Fresh original stuff within the Star Trek universe. That's what I think they need to do. Not do follow-ups to stuff that happened in the shows 30 years ago, not remind us about stuff that happened in TNG or Deep Space Nine, or catch us up on what has been happening since. Just completely new stuff, new stories, not following up or calling back or referencing stories from other shows. New characters, new ship, new stories. That's what I really think they need to do. And hopefully they will, but we'll see. Lackluster 9 to 5. Hello, Steve. I used to follow you because you seem so cool and manly, but now I see you just teach people to be simps and betas. I'm sick of being told I can't have. I'm not weak. So I'm learning how to be cool and badass from a true alpha I found. Andrew's the most manliest man that ever manned. He gets anything he wants, anyone he wants, anytime he wants, and he's living the best life. I haven't finished binging everything about him. I'll finally be caught up tomorrow, but I can't wait to learn how he's doing now. I bet he's a king. You can stay a passive wimp, but I'ma be a top G like him. What do you have to say to that? I think you should look up visiting hours for Romanian prisons if you want to see your hero, Andrew. That's what I think. If we're thinking of the same Andrew, I believe you're going to have to figure out what the visiting hours are at the Romanian prison where he is where he is currently a long-term guest. Yeah. So, best of luck to you. And I hope when you discovered that news, when you got all caught up on what he's doing now earlier this week, it wasn't too disillusioning for you, and best of luck. I love the creative writing questions. I really love the creative writing questions. Michael Ridra, one of my favorite songs is No One Likes Superman Anymore by I Fight Dragons. It's a song about cynical people who dislike Superman and characters like him for being strong and kind and simply defined. I grew up loving hero characters that always try to do the right thing. Captain America, Superman, and OT Luke Skywalker. I was often annoyed by how these characters would be denigrated as unrealistic or childish by obnoxious edgelords. No One Likes Superman Anymore has a line that reverberated with me. Who cares if he's strong? All we see is the wrong we've done reflected in his eyes. I think the point of the song is that people who dislike Superman do so because seeing someone, even fictional, make the right but difficult choices forces people to reflect on times when they did what they knew was wrong and cruel because it was easier. The ridicule comes from shame. What do you think? Why do you think many people tend to react so cynically to noble and kind hero characters? I think you've got a lot of it there. I think there's probably a good deal of the response that is rooted in personal guilt or insecurity, or a lot of us, not a lot of people, can't help but project, and a lot of people, because we can't help but project, we reflexively feel accused even when the thing we're reacting to has nothing to do with us. That's why sometimes you'll see, responses to people on Twitter or on YouTube or something where it's someone who, from their own description of themselves, like, identifies themselves as not being in the group that is addressed in the thing they're responding to, but they still really seem to be taking it personally. It's like if you put up a video about, like, I don't know how many baseball players in the 80s were on cocaine, and someone replies and is like super pissed and is like, we didn't all do cocaine. I played Major League Baseball from 1982 to 1988 and I never did cocaine, and I knew a lot of other guys who never did cocaine either. Okay, well, I'm not talking about you. Why are you so upset? Like, there's a, there's something, it's tempting to draw certain conclusions from how pissed off they get about something that doesn't seem to be even about them. But I think we all have that tendency from time to time. We all have that defensiveness and that wall that goes up, and that instinct to lash out, even if when we stop and think, we realize, oh, they're not actually talking about me. Like, I haven't actually done the things. I'm not actually part of the group that this is directed at or in reference to, but why am I so mad? So I think part of it is that, I think also part of it is that in the 80s, deconstructing superheroes became a big thing, and tearing down superheroes became a big thing, and sort of getting dirt on the clean face, like, oh, Superman, but what if he wasn't so pure? What if he was a little morally compromised, or, that kind of became a thing. And some of those stories are really good. And, some of those superhero deconstructions are brilliant, but some of them are also stories that a lot of people miss the point of, right? Like, Watchmen isn't nearly as cynical as a lot of people seem to think it is. And there, you can always tell, like, the people who read Watchmen and are like totally on Rorschach's side. And not just because Rorschach is, I mean, Rorschach is a fantastic character, but the people who are like, Rorschach was totally right. Rorschach was completely right 100% of the time. It's like, I don't think that's, I mean, if that's the message you take from it, okay, but I don't think that's really where it's trying to get you to go. Um, you know, so I think part of it is that. And after a while, it just kind of becomes received knowledge to a lot of people. I think a lot of people who say things like that, it's like, Superman's so boring. He's the big boy Blue Scout. He's one dimensional. You can't, how can you make him interesting if he always makes the right decision? Like, I think that kind of becomes received information. Like, they don't even think about it. They just accept it as a truism. Like, well, Superman's not as good, or characters like that, Captain America, characters who always do the right thing. They're not as interesting because, you need to have moral ambiguity. You need to have grim and gritty, tortured, brooding characters, or they won't have any depth. And that's just not true. And it's certainly not true with Superman if he's written by someone who knows how to write the character. But yeah, I think it's all of that. But I think you're onto something when you say that in a lot of cases, when people say that, especially if it feels like a very intense personal dislike of the character or of characters like that, it comes from, a reaction to feeling accused of something, even if they aren't actually being accused of anything. General Contact Unit Problem Child, I watched your What the Hell is a Tobacco Harm Reduction Company video yesterday, and it made me wonder if you believe cigarettes should be banned altogether. I notice a lot of liberals and leftists will be very pro-drug decriminalization or legalization, but they'll try to come up with some rationalization for why tobacco should be the one exception to that. I don't agree with that. I'm actually very libertarian when it comes to what people should be able to do to their own bodies. I mean, in my ideal world, things like smoking, alternative medicine, and conversion therapy would technically be allowed, but almost no one would choose to partake in them because we'd all be educated well enough that we'd not be susceptible to the indoctrination and propaganda that makes people think those things are a good idea. Do you think that's naive? I mean, maybe not in the long term. I think in the long term, that's what I would like to see too. And look, I mean, I know a lot of people feel a lot more extremely than I do about drug legalization. I am not necessarily someone who supports full legalization. I fully support decriminalization. I don't think we should be sending people to prison for using drugs. I think that's a terrible idea, and I think it's inhumane. I think it's counterproductive. I just think it's a terrible idea. I don't think it should be treated as, I don't think it should be a felony. I don't think people should be going to prison for years and years and years of their lives because they are drug users, because they're addicts, because they have a health problem that needs treatment. But at the same time, I'm not super comfortable saying, yeah, we should just legalize heroin. Like, I don't see how that would be a benefit to society. Yeah, we should just legalize cocaine. We should just let anybody who wants it, who's, we just let anybody who can afford it get it, and just, they can do whatever they want with it. I'm just not cool with that. I just don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that would help anybody. And I feel similarly about tobacco. Like, the only reason that I would come down against just a blanket ban on cigarettes is because I don't think it would work, and that's really my only argument in favor of not, continuing to enforce very strict bans on other drugs. I at a certain point, it becomes impractical. Same thing with alcohol. Like, we tried banning alcohol in the 20s. It completely backfired. It didn't work at all. Although part of that was because, prohibition was kind of rammed through, and actually it turned out most people in the country, despite it passing as a constitutional amendment, most people in the country really weren't in favor of it at all, and resented it. And it was gone in 10 years or so. It had been repealed. But so I don't think it would work if you try to force it on people. And that would be the only reason why I would say it's not worth trying to ban tobacco or ban cigarettes, because I just don't think it would solve the problem. It wouldn't take. If anything, there might be like a backlash to it, and more people might smoke because people are dipshits, and they'd be like, well, they tell me I can't do it. I'm going to go get some cigarettes and I'll show them, because people are morons and they'll do that kind of thing. But like, morally, I have no problem with it. It's it's a product. Speaking of cigarettes, it's a product that has no use. It is completely worthless. It has no positive effect. It has no benefit. It is a product that currently exists purely to deliver an addictive substance to an addict who is a reliable source of income for the manufacturer. Like, that's it. It is a predatory, parasitic relationship that sucks money out of the pockets of smokers and puts it into the pockets of tobacco company executives. And I think that's gross and disgusting and morally outrageous and repugnant. And I would like to see that stopped. And that's about where I'm at with it. So it kind of is what it is. I would prefer that we do, if we can get there through education and people just being smart enough to choose not to do it so that those companies just kind of go out of business on their own, that would be great. And we've been kind of moving in that direction all along, and hopefully we'll continue moving in that direction. But if there was some way that like an actual like legal ban could be feasible and enforceable and would result in a positive result, then I wouldn't be opposed to it on philosophical grounds at all. David Colby, I got a pitch for a Star Trek show. Here we go. I'm gonna take a drink before I get into this. I got a pitch for a Star Trek show. We open on Earth, and out walks Picard, Troy, Data. He's alive again. Crusher, Worf. It's the whole TNG crew. Even Geordi is there. And oh my, the entire DS9 cast emerges as well. Odo's reconstituted, and we have Quark too. Even Sisko is back. Then the Voyager cast arrives. Janeway, Tom Paris, Chakotay, everyone, even the Doctor. Then, once the whole group is here, a machine gun opens up. We're not talking 1990s TV PG levels of violence either. We've got Verhoeven levels of squib here. Gore splattering everywhere with close-ups. Picard's head explodes like an overripe melon. Neelix shot dead like a dog. Then, as the smoke drifts from the silent barrel, a man steps up and shoots the still twitching Worf twice in the head. And then we follow a new set of characters on their spaceship and their space adventures. What do you think? Can you tell I'm a little frustrated with the current zeitgeist? I can tell, and I share your feelings. And everybody, just so everybody knows, I know David, is often in the chat and posts questions a lot, and he and I go back and forth on Twitter about stuff. For anybody who doesn't know, David is a big Lower Decks fan. So this is coming from and I am not a big Lower Decks fan. So we disagree on that, but we have this common ground here. I actually posted something very similar to this before I saw your question on Twitter. That was basically, like, I hope the series finale of Picard is basically all the characters die, and then Deep Space Nine blows up. And and like, let's just wipe out all possible legacy characters so that the creators of the next show have no choice but to do something new. I would love that. I would love that. I would love if I felt like it wasn't necessary, if writers of Star Trek shows, producers of Star Trek shows would just do that, would just be like, hey, let's create new characters and write new stories. Like, just because the actors from the show from 30 years ago are still alive doesn't mean we have to keep putting them in shows. Like, that's probably not a good idea for the creative long-term future of the project. We should probably, do what we used to do back when we were hiring those actors 30 years ago and do new stuff with new characters. That would be a great idea. I would love that. I would love that. And yes, I think this really puts the point across. Like, do we have to just kill everybody? Do we have to just murder every character on screen in a completely unambiguous way so we can finally move on? Yeah. I share your feelings. And I think I think that's a great idea for an episode. I think that's a great idea for an episode. Next is from It Is Trans Day of Visibility, Mutter Fluffers, some random geek. Good news. The friend mentioned last time that could lose his house. He won't. All right, that's awesome. His house was saved, which is good because he's disabled and has nowhere else to go. But now on to the bad news. As far as I know, since Monday, Joanna was $70 in the hole and is in need of caffeine. I bet she still needs money for pills, back rent, bills, and food. And I have been tapped out since Sunday. Payday for me is today. Phoenix also has credit card debt and past due bills. And the food stamps they get don't last them for a whole month. Same with the $1,200 Joanna gets each month from SSDI. And of course, Naz the Nico and Linaquin are pretty much begging for money for food supplies to pay the bills, etc., each month. So if any cis allies want to help out some trans folks on Trans Day of Visibility, charitylinks.page has all these folks' links. Joanna is actually cis, but queer, and her son is a trans NB. And give them money each month if you can, especially end of the month. So there you go, everybody. If you're looking to do something nice on today, which is the Trans Day of Visibility, charitylinks.page. I will mention that link again at the end of the show before the stream ends. And I'm sure Geek will be posting links multiple times in the chat throughout the show if he hasn't already. So yes, don't forget our friends, especially our trans friends in need today of all days. But generally speaking, if you are in a position where you're fortunate enough to have a little bit left over at the end of the month when your bills have been paid and you want to pass that on to someone who needs it, charitylinks.page is always a good place to turn for people who could use that money. So try to keep that in mind. And thank you very much in advance for your generosity. And thank you, Geek, for always bringing that up and for always keeping that in front of mind for us. Dan, do you think they need Jack because it's the only way to reanimate Picard's corpse? I stand by what Jason and I both said during our review of episode 1 of season 3. I think Jason has moved past this opinion now because Jason has enjoyed the show since then a lot more than I have. Although we both liked episode 2 and we both really liked episode 4. But other than that, I haven't really liked it. And Jason has enjoyed every episode since the first one. So I don't think Jason feels this way anymore. But at the time, we both said, if you want to predict what happens in the show from this point on, just think of the dumbest possible thing they can do. And that's what they'll do. So why do they need Jack? What's the dumbest reason they could possibly need Jack? They need his blood, right? Because that's a thing that they can rip off from an old Star Trek thing. Because remember, what was it in Star Trek Nemesis? What did Shinzon want? He wanted Picard's blood. He needed his blood, right? So they're going to reanimate Picard's corpse, and they need Jack's blood to do it for some reason. Why are they going to reanimate Picard's corpse? Because they are doing the dramatic version of what the show is, which is plundering the corpse of Star Trek The Next Generation. So they're going to represent that on screen by literally plundering the corpse of Jean-Luc Picard and bringing him back to life. What's the dumbest reason they could be doing that? I think I said on our episode 6 review, well, they're going to, because they're secretly in league with the Borg and they're going to bring Locutus back. Because why the hell not? They've gone back to a couple other wells long past the time when it made any sense to do so. So why not drag the Borg back into it for the 15th time as well? Fuck it, right? At this point, fuck it. Do whatever you want. But in all seriousness, I have no idea. And I don't know. Whatever guess I would make, my assumption is it won't be nearly as dumb as what they actually do. So I don't know. But I do like the idea that they've plundered Picard's corpse because that's what the show has actually done for TNG. Cassie Volpine, destroyer of bullshit. So is it just me, or does season 3 of Picard feel like the stealth pilot for a USS Titan show, starring dipshit from Chicago Captain Shaw as Captain Shaw of the USS Titan, also starring Jean-Luc Picard Jr.? as number one on the USS Starship Titan. This question implies spoilers. Oops. I actually after not liking him very much in episode 1, I have come around and I actually like Captain Shaw a lot as a character. He's been one of the highlights of the show since that abysmal first episode. So if they wanted to do a USS Titan show with Captain Shaw, as the lead, and that's it, like Captain Shaw, and then we could have Geordie's daughter as the as the helmsman, because we've already established her and she's a new character. Like, that I think that'd be cool, but no more legacy characters. We have characters that we've already established in this season of Picard as working on the Titan. We can bring them back. We can introduce some new people that haven't, been on the show before. Yeah, if you can find a way to work Jack into it in a way that makes sense, that's cool, because I actually kind of like Jack now too. But yeah, that will be fine with me. I don't want to see Picard anymore. I don't want to see Riker. And as much as I love Riker, I don't want to see Riker anymore. I don't want to see Troy. I don't want to see Worf. I don't want to see Beverly. I don't want to see Geordi. I don't want to see any more TNG characters. You want to do a Titan show? Awesome. Do a Titan show. Make it a new show about new stories. Looking forward, not looking back. And if you want to have it be centered on Captain Shaw and his crew, yeah, screw it. Absolutely. Go for it. Yeah. It doesn't really feel like, it doesn't feel like a stealth pilot because it's the TNG characters who are still centered. Like, Shaw is a good character and has come across very well for the most part. And in episode 4, my favorite episode of the show, he does have meaningful things to do in the story in a supporting character capacity, but still, like, it's a well-written episode and he has meaningful things to do. But he's never been the star of the show. He's never been centered. None of the new characters have been, with the arguable exception of Jack, maybe. None of the new characters have been centered in any of the episodes. It's all been about the TNG characters. So for that reason, it hasn't actually felt like a stealth pilot. But, the newer characters have made good impressions. So, like, they could conceivably use it as justification for doing a Titan show if they wanted at some point in the future. Sure. Agent Meister, who wants to see if those bastards can do 90. Oh, nice. Peldor Joy, Steve. Batman. I'm sure you've heard of him. A wonderful comic book character with a wide range of supporting characters. And to paraphrase Jack Nicholson, a wide range of wonderful toys also. My favorite item from his toy box has always been the Batmobile, and my favorite Batmobile is the Tumbler from the Chris Nolan movies. The 89 version is a close second, but geez, it's impractical. Try driving over speed ramps with that thing. Do you have a favorite Batmobile? And if so, which and why? And by the way, is it just me, or does the Tumbler lack any Bat motif or paraphernalia, which was characteristic of almost every version of Batman's car up until this particular one? Also, would you consider growing a handlebar mustache for your videos? Research suggests that a YouTuber's subscriber rates jump 27% every time they're seen sporting flamboyant facial hair. Please don't try to verify that statement. Just trust me. No handlebar mustache. I'm just going to put the kibosh on that right now. Although I appreciate the suggestion, and it's backed up by, unassailable facts. So it's difficult to argue against, but I'm just going to make a personal choice and say I'm not going to do that. I think my favorite Batmobile may actually be the 89 version. Yeah, the Tim Burton Batmobile. There's something I love the line of it. I love the flow of it. I love that it looks like a Batmobile. Like, if you saw it not knowing what it was, you might think like, well, what is that? The Batmobile? Like, it reads as Batmobile, but it's not clunky. It's not cluttered. It's not over designed. There's a beautiful flow to it. It's just and it's cool. It's just a really cool looking car. And it suits Batman. It suits that Batman in that movie. And yeah, it's impractical, but I don't really care. Like, that's not something that I would worry about. It looks cool. It looks appropriate. Actually, and we're sort of like, the Tumbler is probably my least favorite of the movie ones, of the live action Batmobiles. The Tumbler is probably my least favorite. I just don't like it at all. I think it's too big. I think it's too much like a tank. Uh, it's not very elegant. It's not very stylish, you know. I mean, the lack of a bat motif, that doesn't really bother me, but yeah, I don't really dig the tumbler. I was glad when it was destroyed in the Dark Knight and he just had the bike, the bat pod for the rest of it. Um, I also really like the one in the Robert Pattinson one and the Batman, because it's just a badass black muscle car. I really like the Batmobile in the Batman. Yeah. But I think and of course I love the Adam West one, you know, the classic one from the 60s. That's iconic. I love the Adam West 60s Batmobile, but my favorite is probably the 89 one, the Tim Burton one. Stephen G. Clenard. Hey, Steve. I know you and I have been bitching about all the callbacks and cameos in Star Trek Picard Season 3, but aren't you a little bit disappointed that they haven't brought back Ensign Harry Kim? Uh, I like the people who are suggesting, I think a couple people in the comments to our most recent review were speculating that Harry actually did have a cameo in episode 6, that he was on board Voyager when you got that glimpse of it in the Fleet Museum, that he was still on the ship and he was still an ensign. So I kind of take some solace in that. You know, it's like an imaginary Easter egg. You know, it's a speculative Easter egg. You don't actually have to see it. You can just sort of assume that it's there and be entertained by the thought. I like those kinds of Easter eggs better than the ones we've been getting. Keith, hey, Steve, I am a new patron and I thought I would introduce myself. I considered starting with a pithy bit of humor, such as you can skydive without a parachute, you just can't do it twice. Nice. Or what did the Buddhist say to the hot dog vendor? Make me one with everything. See, I've heard that one. Doesn't make it bad, but I've heard that one. But I will refrain. Anyway, I discovered your Trek videos during COVID and since have become quite a fan of those and many of your other video series. I am a left brain, right brain guy. Attended a liberal arts college, history buff with a degree in physics. Proud to work at NASA in Huntsville on the Artemis program. I love everything from space science to microbrew beers to fine dining and theater. I'm also a recovering novelist who especially enjoys and agrees with your philosophy about story. Keep up the great work. You help keep many of us sane. Take care. Well, I must point out, my friend, not a question, but I do really appreciate it. I appreciate you being a supporter. I appreciate you taking the time to introduce yourself. Hopefully, this will not be the last time I hear from you. And I'm glad you enjoy my stuff. I'm glad you found me during COVID. Hopefully, I was able to provide you with some distraction during that time. And it's really cool that you work for NASA. Me sitting here in my old school NASA hat. That's really cool. And you work on the Artemis program, which is to me the most exciting thing that NASA is doing right now. So yeah, cool. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Sent Merck, hey Steve, it's a WrestleMania time. So let's talk wrestling. At one point in my life, I intended to become a professional wrestler. Did you ever have that notion? WWE seems to be firing on all cylinders lately. I think this is the best WrestleMania build in a decade or more. Do you feel similarly? Meanwhile, AEW seems to be in a really rough patch. Is there anything in that company that gives you hope for its near future? Who, if anyone, do you think could help them turn it around if they got more focus? How? I know I'm full of questions this time, but I just wanted to engage you in some wrestling talk about various subjects because it's that time of year and dang it, we don't get to hear you talk wrestling often enough for my tastes. Well, I don't talk wrestling on this channel often enough for my taste. Okay, so no, I never seriously considered becoming a wrestler. I've never really been athletic in that way. I think I probably could have been like a good commentator at some point. Maybe even a good manager, like a good heel manager, because I feel like I can talk some bullshit when I want to, and I think I might have been good at that. And maybe I could have trained well enough to, at least be able to, take a bump every now and then if necessary. But I don't think I would have ever wanted or was ever super interested in actually being a wrestler. I mean, I would wrestle with my friends. Like we would wrestle in my backyard or in the basement or something, like put down a mattress and wrestle like that. But, and we would work matches, we would say, okay, let's wrestle about 10 minutes and then you beat me with, the swanton, because I had a friend who would do Jeff Hardy's swanton bomb on me off the couch. And he was good. Like he was good. He made it look good for a fucking backyard untrained bullshit wrestling match. But we would do stuff like that. But I don't think any of us ever seriously considered like getting trained and actually trying to become a wrestler. I agree with you. I think it's the best WrestleMania. It may be the best WrestleMania build that I've ever seen. There are at least 3 top matches I can think of on the show that have had they've almost flawless builds. Of course, Cody and Roman, I think, has been done almost perfectly since Cody came back and won the Rumble. I think they've done things with that are so smart and avoided a lot of pitfalls that they have failed to avoid in the past. And very closely tied to that, sort of a branch off of that same story, is the Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens versus Usos tag match. The whole Sami Zayn bloodline, Kevin Owens, Usos soap opera has been amazing. It's one of the best, if not the best, long-term angles that the company has ever done. So, I mean, yeah. And then I've really enjoyed the build to Rey Mysterio versus Dominic. I think that's been handled incredibly well and was paced just right. They dragged it out and held off on Rey finally turning on him and accepting the match just long enough. They waited until 2 weeks before the big show before Rey finally just had enough and let him have it and said, "I'll see you at WrestleMania." So the build for those 3 matches has been fantastic. And if you look back at past years of WrestleMania, I mean, you're lucky if the main event gets a decent build, let alone other matches on the undercard. So, yeah, I think this year's build to WrestleMania has been at least the best in a decade, if not much, much longer than that. Yeah. And as for AEW, yeah, I agree. It's been in a very rough patch creatively for a long time, for over a year at least. There's a lot of people that give me hope in terms of talent. Like, they have a lot of wrestlers under contract that are terrifically talented wrestlers. You know, I mean, they've got FTR, MJF is terrific. Darby Allin, I really like. Will Hobbs, Powerhouse Hobbs, I think has a lot of potential. Wardlow, I think, has a lot of potential. Jade Cargill, I think, is fantastic, although she's been kind of lost because they have no idea where to go with her, you know, but I think she is, you know, probably easily their most successful, like, homegrown project, you know, where she started, where she literally had her first match in AEW and they built her up into someone who really feels like a star, or at least a potential, you know, top star. And a lot of other people on the roster. I've always loved Hikaru Shida. I thought she was a fantastic women's champion, and I hate the way they've wasted her over really since she lost the title. Like, she kind of comes in and does something and then disappears for months on end. But they do that to a lot of people. Like, the booking of AEW has been so abysmal, so inconsistent. Hasn't done anybody any favors. But yeah, I mean, they have a lot of people on the roster that are, I mean, God, they have Bryan Danielson, they have Jon Moxley, they have Claudio Castagnoli, they have like some experienced guys who are really good and bring a lot to the table. They just need to get their shit together creatively, you know, and take some of the younger guys who have athletic skill and can do a lot of really impressive moves and get them to settle down and learn how to actually work a fucking proper wrestling match that tells a story and has psychology and means something and goes somewhere and makes sense and isn't just a collection of eye-popping moves that are being done for no reason, which I think is another big problem with AEW. They have these jaw-dropping matches where guys and girls are doing things that are like, oh my God, I can't believe they just did that. That was like an incredibly stunning athletic feat that means nothing. Like, it means nothing. It does nothing for the match. It's just, oh shit, did you see that? And a lot of times, it doesn't even lead to a pin attempt, let alone the finish of the match. So, I mean, that's a big problem too. But no, and what gives me hope is just the level of talent, because they have a ton of talent. They just they just don't know what the hell to do with it. Dataport Doll, evening, Steve. Forgive me if I'm about to start drama, but this week YouTube decided, I guess, that since I have been enjoying you and Jason reviewing Picard, that I wanted to see Lore Reloaded talk about how the Federation supports fascism. I could rip on that vid by pointing out that he conflates the TNG episode about relocating the planet of Native Americans with the Maquis, or how he seemed to miss the fact that Star Trek VI was a Cold War allegory, not a World War II reference, or any other number of other errors you make if you get all your Star Trek knowledge from Memory Alpha. But I actually had another observation. Why go through mental gymnastics to deceptively omit and edit information about Star Trek? I'm accustomed to it in right-wing political videos, but it baffles me to see it in right-wing Star Trek videos. What skin is there to have in the game? Or do the Freeze Peach Warriors just need to control the narrative on every tiny thing in their vision, no matter how insignificant? Well, in full disclosure, I know Lore Reloaded a little teensy weensy tiny bit. We haven't talked for a very long time, and I haven't watched one of his videos. Actually, I don't know if I've ever watched one of his videos since he rebranded to Lore Reloaded, because I just don't like the lore videos. I just don't give a shit about, videos that just, discuss the lore of Star Trek without having like an angle on it, or a thesis or a point to make or whatever. So I haven't watched any of his videos. I know he and I disagree on a lot of shit, and we've never been super close. As far as I know, we're not on the outs. Like we don't have any. There's no grudge, at least not on my part. I don't think on his part. And I don't really think about him all that much, or have any reason to, be mad at him, or to have any particular feelings or opinions about him. He does his thing, and I don't watch. So I can't speak specifically to the video you saw, but I think, with a lot of people, I don't even know if it's conscious. Like, I don't even know if it's intentional. I think it's just the way they naturally interpret things. I think with a lot of right-wing Star Trek fans, it's not that they are willfully, selectively interpreting things. They're not cutting things out or being deceptive. That's just how they see it. They don't need to take control of the narrative and warp it to fit their worldview. They do that automatically. And it leads to them saying sometimes some really, really baffling things. Like, people leave comments on my videos sometimes where they say, well, the problem with, Star Trek's always been political, but the problem is that nowadays it gets political in ways where, like, they tell you what to think. And classic Star Trek, classic Star Trek would always let you make up your own mind, like they would never hit you over the head with it. They were subtle. And I'm always like, have you watched the show? Like, we're talking about Star Trek, right? Star Trek was subtle, would let people make up their own minds. But I think that's one of their rationalizations that they use when they watch a Star Trek episode that has an obvious, heavy-handed, can't miss progressive message. I think the way they rationalize it is by saying, well, but ultimately they leave it up to you. Do they? Do they though? I had someone say that to me about The Outcast, the episode of TNG where Riker falls in love with the woman who comes from a gender neutral society, and then she realizes that actually she does have a gender and she's a woman, and her and Riker fall in love, and then she's arrested by her society for living like a deviant lifestyle, and they basically give her conversion therapy. And the episode ends on this really tragic note where she has basically been brainwashed. She has been subjected to conversion therapy, and her true self has been destroyed or submerged underneath conditioning, or however you want to look at it. And Riker comes to get her, to take her away from this place, and she chooses to stay because she has been quote unquote fixed. I had someone say to me that episode was the kind of episode where you were left to draw your own conclusion. And I honestly cannot fathom anyone watching that episode and feeling like it wasn't trying to tell you that this was awful. Like, whether you agree or not, you could be the biggest homophobe, the biggest transphobe in the world, right? You could think that in your opinion, the people on this planet are totally right and they should have, made her undergo conversion. They're like, you can think that all you want, but surely you at least recognize that the episode is trying to tell you pretty clearly that it thinks this is wrong, that we should view this as a sad thing, as a tragic thing, as an injustice that has been done here, right? It's not asking you to make up your own mind. It's telling you this is wrong. And when people do the equivalent of this in the real world, that's wrong too, and you shouldn't be okay with it. That's the point of that episode. That's the point of Star Trek. is to say, when the thing that is the real life equivalent of what we showed you in this episode happens, it's not okay and you shouldn't be okay with it. That's the point of Star Trek. And it's not conservative and it's not right wing. But people who come at it with that worldview just naturally interpret it that way. So I don't think it's, I don't know. I can't speak specifically to the case that we're discussing here, because I don't know him well enough or haven't watched his content recently enough to be able to make any kind of guess or judgment about it. But in a lot of cases, it's not even a willful thing. It's just something that naturally happens because they see everything through those glasses. Brian McKinley. Hi, Steve. I'm delighted to see that you are enjoying this season of Picard more than the last two. I've been loving your reviews with Jason. While I am more forgiving of the series' occasional fan service moments, some of the back and forth between you and Jason has made me bust out laughing. My question has to do with your dislike of using DS9 plot elements in service of a TNG reunion story. Would you feel differently if this were a new series, introducing new characters dealing with the after effects and consequences of the Dominion War? Or do you just feel that all that history should be confined to DS9? I, for one, have always wanted to see more follow-up to such an impactful chapter in the universe's history, so I'm loving all this stuff. Yes, it would make a difference. Like, I still say my preference is for a new show to just do new stuff and not go back and follow up on stuff from an old show. But I am much more open and would be much more inherently interested in a show that was about all new characters with a story that had connections to the Dominion War or was about the after effects of the Dominion War or, the consequences of it or whatever, but was told through all new characters and was telling stories that we have not heard before and talking about things that we have not heard about before. The Dominion War being the backdrop, being the background, the setup for it. But going forward, it's all stuff we haven't heard about before, right? I would much prefer that to what they're doing in this third season of Picard. And it's not just that they're doing Deep Space Nine stuff in a TNG story with TNG characters who have zero on-screen history with things like the Dominion and Changelings, with the exception of Worf, who was on Deep Space Nine. It's not just that, although that would probably feel weird no matter when they did it, but it's the fact that they're doing it for what is supposedly the big farewell to these characters. That's the part that I think makes it a continued annoyance for me. Because if this was season 2 of Picard and they said, we're going to at least do one more season, and this whole thing wasn't being framed both in terms of the marketing and in terms of just how the story is being told and the tone of it and the direction that it's going. If it wasn't being framed as the farewell to these characters, if it was season 1 or season 2 of Picard and they brought the gang back together to do a new show and they were doing Dominion War stuff, like I would still kind of think like, why are you doing Dominion War stuff with TNG characters who have nothing to do with it? I would still kind of feel that way. But I would probably be more open to it because, it's like, well, it's the story they decided to tell for this season, right? But to take what is being framed as the capstone for these characters, as the farewell, the swear to God, this time we're not kidding, final episode or final adventure of the TNG characters. And they're all reunited for the first time since Nemesis. Like it's the first reunion of all the major characters from TNG since the last movie they all did together. And it's the final season of this Picard show. And you know, it's the last go round, right? It's the last rodeo for all these old heroes. And for this occasion, the story is to pick up a plot thread from Deep Space Nine that none of them, except for Worf, had anything to do with. That just feels wrong. It just feels like a weird, wrong, dissonant creative choice to me. So it's not just DS9 stuff in a TNG show. It's the choice to do that for the last season and for the occasion of the reunion. It just feels off. It feels wrong. It feels like a different choice should have been made. But yeah, you know, a show with all new characters dealing with fallout from the Dominion War, I would find that much more interesting. Yes. Matthew Gretzinger. Hi, Steve. I have a non-spoilery question about your favorite new Star Trek show, Picard. Sarcasm. Having only seen 6 episodes at this point, though 7 have been released, is there anyone you think won't survive the show? If so, or if not, why do you think so? Picard himself may be the obvious answer, but I'm curious about what you think. Thanks. Well, yes, I have not seen episode 7 yet. Episode 7 is out, but I will not watch it until tomorrow because that's when Jason and I watch it together. And then we do our review right after that. So I haven't seen episode 7 yet. So if they kill somebody off in episode 7, I don't know about it. If I had to guess, it would not shock me if Riker does not make it out of the show. It would not shock me if they kill off Riker at some point. I don't know that for sure. I would not bet on that. I'm not saying I necessarily expect that, but if that happens, it won't surprise me. They've given Jonathan Frakes a lot in this season so far. He has one of the more compelling character arcs, or at least he did until after episode 4 when they kind of dropped it. But he did have one of the more compelling character arcs in the season up to that point. He has had moments to shine, at least, if not more than that, in every episode so far. He has been one of the best parts of the show. He's been a consistent highlight for me in the series up to this point. And you know, where we leave him in at the end of episode 6 is kind of a perilous situation. So it would not surprise me if Riker doesn't make it out of the season alive. It wouldn't surprise me if Worf doesn't make it out of the season alive. I mean, they already teased Worf's death in an earlier episode, and it turned out it was a fake out to get the bad guys. It wouldn't surprise me if they you know, polish him off for good. At this point, why not kill Data again for the 3rd fucking time? You know, but no, so there's a lot of them that wouldn't surprise me. But if I had to pick, I would say it would not surprise me if Riker doesn't make it all the way through. Joe McClory, today is my 43rd birthday. Could you be so kind to do the honors? Happy birthday, Joe. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Joe. Happy birthday to you. And many more. And I hope a lot more because I'm turning 43 this year too. So us people who are around this age, I would love for us to live a long, long time. So happy birthday, Joe. Now the real question. I remember the Rittenhouse verdicts and talking with a trans friend of mine who said something along the lines of, if that is what is considered self-defense, I could get away with shooting people at least once a month. I didn't give that statement much thought until the recent right-wing attacks against the trans community, because a very small amount of the recent shooters have been or have claimed to be part of the trans community. I'm worried with attacks of all kinds building up against the community. It is not unreasonable for trans people to want to defend themselves, but I worry that things will escalate. Hell, it is even possible that some liberals who care more about gun control than trans people will even throw them under the bus in hopes of getting something through. What are your feelings on this? What can we do? It's difficult because, as you know, I am pretty staunchly, absolutely anti-gun. I would never recommend or go out of my way to support anyone owning a firearm. I think having a gun with you or near you does nothing but increase the danger that you will be harmed in some way. But if you are a member of a marginalized group, if you are a member of a persecuted group, a denigrated and demonized and vilified and targeted group like trans people are, it feels like an incredibly privileged thing for me to say to one of the members of that community, well, you shouldn't want to have a gun, because to them, they feel vulnerable, they feel targeted, and they want to be able to protect themselves. And is it right for me in my position of privilege and relative safety to sort of talk down to them and say, well, you're wrong, you shouldn't want that? I just don't feel like that's right. So it's a difficult position for me. It's one of those occasions where I just keep my mouth shut because my opinion isn't desired or requested or probably welcome. So I just don't say anything. But yeah, it's difficult. Ultimately, the solution is to remove that threat to trans people, is to address the problems that are the cause of some trans people feeling like they need to have a gun or they need to be able to defend themselves in some extraordinary way because they feel that threatened. Like the long-term solution is to remove that threat, right? But that's not a quick fix. So in the meantime, what do we do? I don't know. One thing we should definitely do, and you mentioned this in your question, and I'm glad you did, we should speak up when anybody, whether it's liberals or fellow leftists or people on the right, if anybody tries to use trans people as a wedge, as a pawn, tries to vilify them or make them scapegoats in order to try and push through gun control, or to try to make it out like trans people are a uniquely unstable group. And well, maybe we can't get guns out of everybody's hands, but we should specifically try to keep trans people from having guns. Like if anybody tries any shit like that, we need to stand up to that and speak out against that and say, motherfucker, trans people as a group statistically are far, far, far more likely to be victims of violent crime than they are to ever commit violent crime. And just because every once in a very, very great while, a trans person will find a way to get their hands on a gun and will, for some reason, do something absolutely awful and unforgivable with it, that doesn't mean that trans people as a group should be suspected or targeted or scapegoated any more than it means that cishet white men, who are overwhelmingly, most commonly the perpetrators of those kinds of crimes, should be suspected or blamed as a group. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it should work. That's not the way it should work. And anybody who tries to act like it does work that way should be told to get fucked in the most brutal language possible and should be shut down as quickly as possible. Because it's not fair, it's not right, and practically speaking, it's not helpful. But other than that, again, it's one of these issues. Like I feel like I'm saying the same thing that I said in response to to Dana's question back at the beginning. Like I don't know specifically what we should do. I don't know. But we should not be blaming trans people. That's for sure. And when we see trans people being blamed, we should speak out against it. Carlisle the Cinephile. Hello there, Steve. I've been thinking about shows like BoJack Horseman, Rick and Morty, or Breaking Bad, and films like Joker and Fight Club. All of these stories are about morally complex and sometimes straight up evil protagonists who do awful things, but we are still expected to sympathize with them to some degree. And a concerning number of people look up to these characters or use them as excuses for the harmful things they've done in their own lives. Do you think portraying characters like these in sympathetic lights does more harm than good if it allows shitty people to feel less shitty about the shitty things they do? I know that this wasn't the intention of the people producing the stories, but is this a case where intent doesn't matter as much as impact? Or is it only individuals who miss the point of these works? And again, I'm sorry for the last minute entry. Oh no, you submitted it like hours before the show. You submitted it with plenty of time. I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything. I never like to say that a writer has no responsibility, because I do think intention matters, and I do think it's incumbent on a writer, at least to a certain point, to make their intentions clear to the audience, or at least so make their intentions known or apparent in the story in such a way that it would be clear to a reasonable member of the audience, whatever that means. It's a very subjective, very iffy proposition, but I do think there is some responsibility on the storyteller. But of course, yes, it's also true that once a story gets out into the world, once it leaves your hands, you can't control what happens to it, and you can't control how other people read it. And if you write a story with a protagonist who is a bastard, who does awful things, but is also portrayed as a sympathetic human being, and your hope as the storyteller is that people who read the story or watch the movie or whatever will identify with the humanity of the character and sympathize with the character, but will also be able to recognize that what the character is doing is wrong and is not to be excused. And that wasn't your point in telling the story, was to say, actually, what this evil guy does is good and we shouldn't be mad at him for it. Like, that there are still people who can take that story and completely miss that point and go, yeah, the Joker was right. You know? I think a lot of it comes down to individuals missing the point. And a lot of it comes down to interpretation, and a lot of it comes down maybe to reading comprehension. I mean, it would be nice if students in high school and college were taught reading comprehension in a way that you know, they could better identify these things in stories and recognize that just because a character is presented in a sympathetic light in certain ways, that doesn't mean that the author is telling you that you should be on this character's side and approve of everything they do, no matter what. You know, I know on her YouTube channel, and I think on some of our live streams, Dana, my co-host on Trek Reluctantly, and also the co-star of the Ensign's Log podcast, talks about when she teaches Julius Caesar to her students, one of the things she does is give them an assignment where they are to write a summary of a or a scene of a confrontation between a hero and a villain in a story that they're familiar with, like a movie or a TV show or a book or whatever. And write it from the hero's point of view. And then a later assignment in the same unit is to come back to that, to revisit it, and to rewrite the same scene from the point of view of the villain, so that you as not just as the reader, but in that case as the writer, can understand things from both points of view, can see things from the shoes of the hero and the villain, and hopefully be able to develop an understanding of both sides, while also recognizing that both sides are not necessarily equally valid, or that just because you can have sympathy and understanding with a person who does horrible things, that doesn't mean that you have to approve of the things they do, or that you should approve of the things they do, that you can have a more sophisticated understanding, that you can have an appreciation for a character and even a sympathy for a character and a recognition of a character's humanity without taking their side or thinking that what they do is right. So I think part of that is that there's a place for that as well. But yeah, something. So there's a coherent answer in there somewhere, I think. But really, really good question. Really good question. All Mod Cons, aka Cindy. I found your channel last summer and finally became a Patreon subscriber last week. I started with Star Trek and stayed for the political commentary and atheist reads. My absolute favorite thing you do is Steven's Stuffy. The shorts are nice, but I need to know, when do we see Jack again? I'm having withdrawals of that drunken bear. LOL. Jack has appeared on the last couple of Turkey Day riff videos that I've done with Stuffy. And Jack will be making appearances in the upcoming Stuffy shorts at some point, actually. And of course, when Dana and I are writing new, like, full-length Stuffy episodes, but that writing process is taking a while because it's a collaboration between Dana and I, and we both have a lot of other stuff to do, and it's difficult to, prioritize writing a Stuffy script when Dana works full-time as a teacher, and I, after I stopped doing the Stuffy videos for a while, I moved on to other things and have a full production schedule. So, it's just about finding time to do it. But Jack will be in those. And actually, Dana and I talked a little bit today about a way that we can frame those hypothetical upcoming future Stuffy videos that we're writing in a way so that we can still tell the story that we want to tell in those, but I can still also bring Jack into the Stuffy shorts if I want to. So I would not, he won't be in any of the shorts that I'm premiering on Askaway in the next several weeks, because I haven't written any shorts with Jack in them yet, but I would expect that Jack might start popping in every now and then in a Stuffy short in the future going forward. So you'll see Jack in those from time to time. And eventually when we get back to doing like a full season of Stuffy and Friends, Jack will be a character in those too. So Jack isn't gone. Jack is coming back for sure. Isaiah Taylor. So a decade or so ago, I thought that being a fan of Star Trek and space exploration would mean that I would be single and never find a girlfriend/wife. I was told this from my father, brother, and others when I was younger. Steve, you have clearly proven that point not to be true, but sometimes I can't help thinking that I'm simply too eccentric and quirky to find someone. One example, a couple of days ago, I watched an old 1989 CNN news broadcast about Voyager 2 visiting Neptune, and I'm obsessed with Titanic and other ships of that period. I love rock and roll and alternative music from the early 90s, just to name a very few things I'm into. Of course, I'm not saying that I'm entitled to nor expect to be in a relationship, but given my troubled history with women, I wanted to see if it were possible to find someone who is interested in me, and no, they do not have to be exactly like me nor autistic. What do you think, Steve? I think that you are a very, very smart, very charming, very funny guy. And I think, yes, you have eclectic interests. You have interests that maybe a lot of people might find unusual, but they are interests that are also shared by a lot of people. So I don't think any of those things should be a barrier to you finding someone. Now, I mean, obviously it's not that easy. There's no guarantee and there's no telling when or where this will happen, but I don't necessarily subscribe to the belief that, well, there's somebody out there for everybody, but there's somebody out there for most of us. There's actually multiple somebodies out there for most of us. And I have no doubt that eventually you will find one of these people and you will hit it off, and she will be into some of the same stuff that you're into, and she will like you and think you're funny and think you're cute and think you're interesting when you talk about shit that you like. And you will have similar feelings about her, and when she talks about her interests and things that she knows about, and I know, I have faith that you will find somebody eventually. I can't tell you when, I can't tell you where, I can't tell you who that is, and I can't guarantee it, but I think it is incredibly likely. And I don't think the fact that you are autistic, or the fact that you like certain kinds of music, or the fact that you're into old space shit, or that you're into Star Trek is going to be a barrier. I think despite all of those many factors, that there is someone, and in fact many someones out there, who would be interested in you and you would be compatible with. And I hope you find that person sooner rather than later. But that's all I can really tell you. Russell. Hey, Steve, last Friday of me working in the evening. I'm afraid I might miss another one of your great Q&As, but starting next week, I should be all days, so I can attend your DS9 rewatches and your Q&As. Anyways, hope you're doing good, as always. On today's question, I've seen a lot of comments recently on ACAB, and I disagree. While I am not ignorant to the fact that we have corrupt officers, the fact is ACAB stands for all cops. And again, I disagree. To quote Sipowicz, you lose a fight, you lose your life. And I am grateful that we have a system that protects us from violent offenders, such as sex crimes and murders and robberies, etc. Why is it wrong to be grateful we have men and women that serve to protect us? Like I said, I know there are corrupt officers, and my hope is that they will be charged as such. But overall, what am I missing? Thanks for your channel. As always, I will probably listen to your response. I will listen to your response probably tomorrow. Take care, Steve. My answer to this would probably be different from some other people on the left. First of all, I interpret all cops are bastards, or ACAB, to be an indictment of the system of policing that we have in this country. All cops are bastards means that even the good cops are part of an unjust system that inflicts harm on people and allows, for the most part, the people who inflict the harm to get away with it. So all cops are bastards because they are part of that system. I know Dana has said before that she thinks a better way to put it would be ACAC, all cops are complicit, but that's not as catchy. You can't, what, ACAC? That's not as fun to say as ACAB. That's how I interpret it. It doesn't necessarily mean that every individual cop is a horrible monster. But it means that they are a participant in a harmful system. A system that needs, at the very least, to be fundamentally reformed, and in the opinions of some people, needs to be completely torn down, and, in the opinions of some people, replaced by something very different, or, in the opinions of some other people, just not replaced at all. Now, I don't go that far. I am not someone who believes in the complete abolition of police. I think we need to have some form of law enforcement in society. I think it needs to be a lot different than it is now. I think it needs to have a radically different relationship to the communities that it's meant to serve. I don't think it's as simple as just hiring a new police chief, or, or firing problem officers or whatever, or, having them get more training, or giving them more money or giving them less money. Or I don't think it's the kind of thing that can be fixed with just little tweaks here and there. I think it needs to be fundamentally rethought and rebuilt. But I do think there needs to be some kind of policing. But in the meantime, before that happens, that's what ACAB means. That the way we do policing in this country doesn't make sense, leads to violence against the citizens from the police, leads to lack of accountability in almost all cases for individual police who are responsible for that violence. And not just violence, other forms of criminal activity, corruption, subversion of justice, that sort of thing. And until that system is fixed, or replaced by something that works better, all cops are bastards because they're a part of the system. So I mean, That's how like I said, that's how I feel about it. Other people may have an even harsher view than that. Other people, not so much, but that's where I come down on it. That it's not that every single individual cop is literally a bastard, but they're in service of a system of bastards, if you want to put it that way. And last question from John Burns. Prediction for the Stanley Cup Finals? No. I don't have a prediction for the Stanley Cup Finals because I haven't been watching hockey. I haven't been following it. I have no idea. I actually looked it up on Wikipedia after I got your question. And I saw that that Boston has qualified for the playoffs. Obviously, the playoffs haven't even started yet, so it's not like Boston's in the finals. Boston has qualified for the playoffs. So fuck it, Boston. But other than that, I have no idea. I do not follow professional hockey. All right. Whew, that took a while. I had a lot of questions. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to all my patrons and members for submitting all those awesome questions. Now, I'm going to turn to the live chat in just a minute. But first, I have a brand new stuffy short. I have a brand new stuffy short to debut, and it's coming at you in just a minute. This stuffy short, of course, will go on my YouTube channel as a standalone YouTube short in square format tomorrow, but you get the full frame version tonight. So here it is, a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. Enjoy. What you reading?
A biography of Stephen Foster.
Any good?
Oh yes, he composed so many timeless songs, but died young and penniless.
So many great artists are unappreciated in their own lives. Take me, for example. I've written lots of great songs that nobody's probably ever going to hear because the world fails to recognize my genius.
Can you name one of those songs?
What about that Pee-wee's Playhouse-themed parody of Zombie by the Cranberries that I wrote? He's just ahead, Jambi, Jambi.
It's very specific.
Wait until you hear it with musical accompaniment. Stay here, I'll go get my concertina.
There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more.
There you go. Hope you enjoyed it. I like that one. I'm pleased with how that one turned out. There you go. That's the new Stuffy short. And now to the live chat for the rest of the show. What's everybody want to talk about? Oh, stuff me with Stuffy. I love the filthy sexual innuendo that is being thrown around about my adorable stuffed dog. Ghost Rule, do you mean I have a stuffy nose like tonight, like right now, or on the video? I guess I'm not. I don't feel super stuffy, but I guess I'm sniffing a little bit. Oh, there was a super chat that might amuse me. A Kane29C. Let me see if I can find it. Stephen Glenard. Enough with the Stephen Stuffy legacy characters, for fuck's sake. I love it. I love it. And here's one from Isaiah Taylor saying, I would have preferred an Academy show based around the TOS movie era. Hence, I want the Saved by the Bell Clueless aesthetics. I'd be down for that. You know, I like that. I like the costumes from that era. Cast Iron Chaos with a super chat. These thugs and radical left monsters have just indicated the 45th president of the United States of America and the leading Republican candidate by far for the 2024 nomination for president. Yes. I love that. And I love people pointing out that, like, apparently he didn't fix it. Like, it still says that. It still says indicated. Beep Boop. Did you see the Venom media parody? I have no idea what that is. So no. I did not see that. Philip Kehoe says, I think Starfleet Academy sounds like a good premise for a show that takes its cues from Strange New World approach to storytelling. Yeah, I can see that. 255 AD says, the way you answered my question, what would you say to the assertion people getting to do what they want with their bodies has to be viewed as a good in and of itself? It feels like I don't want to say that people shouldn't be allowed to do what they want with their own bodies, because I do think bodily autonomy is a fundamental, principle of human rights. But I mean, is it good for society to have a large group of people, addicted to an incredibly harmful, corrosive, deadly drug? Like, I don't know. It's difficult to strike. It's difficult to strike a balance there. You know what I mean? Because it's not just about a person harming themselves. There are repercussions that go beyond them, but I don't know. It's a tough question, because I'm very sympathetic to, to the bodily autonomy argument. I think it's an incredibly important and very sound principle. So I don't know. Pedro Noguera says, I'm writing a story about a girl who asks Dr. Frankenstein to make a perfect companion out of her dead brother and dead friend. As a sci-fi and horror connoisseur, do you have any insights? It sounds kinky. That's my insight. It sounds kinky. Steve Schmeling says, saw your MST3K. I remember maybe you do, asking why no vids about MST. I like to think I had something to do with that. Yes, I don't think I made that video specifically because you said that, but I did remember that you mentioned that I talk about how I like MST3K a lot, but I never really do videos about it. So yeah, I'm glad you liked that video. And I'm glad I thought of a reason to make a video about MST3K because I do love it, and I love talking about it. Happy Indictment Week, Gedrin Y. Dana, what do we say? What do we say that gives people something to vote for? And if you don't know, who does? Or is there no hope and we should all just give up anyhow? No, of course not. Of course we shouldn't just give up. What should we do? Like, what should we do to give people something to vote for? I mean, first of all, it will be nice to encourage politicians who are currently in office to pass meaningful reforms, to pass legislation that would give voters a reason to believe that the consequences of elections do matter and that it does make a difference, and I think we should maybe find ways to approach people and to engage them on problems that they care about, and have proposals that sound like they might actually work. Like if someone is concerned about poverty and the plight of the working class, we should say, well, Democrats are the party of labor unions, and Democrats are the party that wants to raise the minimum wage, and Democrats have all of these other proposals and policies that they support that would address poverty and address, wage stagnation and income inequality. And then when Democrats get into power and have the opportunity to act on these proposals, they should do it. Yeah, but I don't know. Like I said, if I knew the answer, and it was an easy answer, I would go for it. I would I would not keep it to myself. Beep Boop Venom Geek Media 98 has a Star Trek YouTuber slander video. I have no idea who that is, and I really have no interest in watching that video, but thank you for telling me about it. Yeah, Geek, I agree with that. Treat addiction as a medical problem. Absolutely. And honestly, you know what? I mean, maybe if we treated healthcare the way we should, and healthcare was not treated as a commodity, but as something that everybody should have access to free of charge at point of service, and people who suffered from drug addiction could go and get the help they needed without it being, any kind of financial burden, maybe I would feel differently. Maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal. Maybe having easier access to addictive drugs would not be as destructive, because if people did get addicted, there would be easier ways for them to seek treatment. I don't know. Nick Jeffrey says, I've been enjoying Picard season 3, but even more, I love your and Jason's reviews. Seeing your MST3K video made me wonder if Jason was your companion robot, or am I Jason's? Am I Jason's companion robot? I don't know. It depends. When Jason and I watch things together, the dynamic isn't really like, I can't really map it to an MST3K thing, like, because we're ourselves. Like, he's him and I'm me. So, sometimes I'm the one who is sort of the crow and throws in the little dark jokes, or kind of drags things into more of a twisted direction. And sometimes Jason is the one who does that. It really kind of depends. But we do have a lot of fun watching things together and making fun of things. That's one of the reasons why I really enjoy when we do our commentary tracks every year for Christmas, where we watch a movie live and record it and then release it as a commentary track so people can play our podcast while they're watching the movie. Those are a lot of fun, because I wouldn't quite compare those to MST3K or a riff track, because we don't write them ahead of time. But they're still a lot of fun to do. Here's another super chat from Isaiah Taylor. Since those movies came out in the Valley Girl 1980s and 90s, I'm also brainstorming about a Star Trek miniseries about Praxis and its geopolitical impact throughout the Klingon Empire. That could be something. That could be something. Again, that's one of those things where, like, the idea in and of itself doesn't, like, necessarily blow my hair back, but, it could be something for sure. Steve Schmeling, I didn't say I liked it. 285 AD says, do you think it's normal for little boys to hate girls? I called a character in a show misogynist, and the other people in the Reddit said, well, he was a little boy. All little boys hate girls. No, I don't think it's normal. I think it's conditioned. I think it's something we condition little boys to think about girls. And I think, I don't think children are born with an innate dislike of the opposite gender, that then they grow out of. And if they turn out to be hetero, it turns into an attraction. Like, I don't think it works that way. I think if little boys act like they hate little girls, it's because they've been conditioned to. Pedro, it wasn't kinky until you said that, Steve. Okay, really? A woman goes to Dr. Frankenstein and says, make the perfect mate out of the body of my brother and some other guy, and that wasn't kinky? Okay. Panda Head Studio says, how excited would you be for shows like Picard, but for Cisco, Janeway, or Archer? Not at all. Not at all. I would positively not want to see those shows. Isaiah Taylor with another super chat. A lot of Cold War imagery and motifs are going to be in it. Also, it's going to be heavily based on the show Chernobyl, as well as the actual disaster. Well, now you've got me hooked. See, now I'm into it. Now it's like, a Star Trek show based on Praxis exploding, but using that event as a way to tell a story with parallels to, 1990s end of Cold War stuff that also, feels like or borrows from the aesthetic or is inspired by the aesthetic of the Chernobyl series. Like, oh, now you got me. Oh, I love that. You should have led with that. Seriously, that's super intriguing to me now. Kane 20C, deathmatch time, tag team match edition. Donald Trump and Boris Johnson versus Ronald Reagan versus Margaret Thatcher. Ooh, boy. As much as it pains me, I think I'd have to take Reagan and Thatcher. Not because I think they deserve to live, but because I think Trump and Johnson deserve to die more. Some random geek, if Democrats are the party for unions, then why did Biden force the railroad workers back to work, killing their strike? Well, that's exactly the kind of shit I'm talking about. Democrats shouldn't be doing that. when they say they're the party of unions, they need to walk the walk. I agree with you completely. I supported the strike. I don't think that Biden should have stepped in to end the strike like that. Or if he did step in, he should have stepped in more emphatically on the side of the workers, and said to the railroads, "Hey, you need to give these people what they want. Let's get everybody back to work." I completely agree with you. I think Democrats need to not do that and need to, walk the walk. Pedro Noguera with a wrestling question. Bless your heart. I guess you're the best person to help me start enjoying wrestling. I know nothing about it, but it seems to be so fun. So where should I start? Who is your favorite wrestler and why? Well, my favorite wrestler at the moment, my favorite current wrestler is Cody Rhodes. And the reason Cody is my favorite wrestler is, first of all, he's a good, fundamentally sound professional wrestler. He can have good matches with a wide variety of opponents. He's not a daredevil who just does crazy dives and crazy moves for no reason. He is athletic and he can do acrobatic moves on occasion, but he does them when he should do them in the match. He has a good head on his shoulders. He has a good sense of storytelling and psychology. He doesn't just do 10 eye-popping somersault, dives in a row for no reason other than to make people go, "Oh my God." He's a good wrestler. He has a good story. He has a good angle, especially right now. So the main event of, and it's weird, I have deja vu because I was talking about this with Dana on the phone the other day. But the main event of WrestleMania this year is Cody Rhodes challenging for the WWE World Title against Roman Reigns. And Roman Reigns has been the world champion for the last 3 years almost. And Cody is the guy who, if all goes well, if all goes according to plan, and if they go the logical direction with this booking, Cody is going to beat him. And that will be very good, because the story that they are telling with Cody leading up into this main event match with Roman is Cody Rhodes is the son of Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes was one of the greatest professional wrestlers who ever lived. He was a legend. He was a superstar for 40 years in the business. Dusty wrestled in the WWE, the WWF at the time when he was there, in the late 80s and early 90s, and briefly in the late 70s too, when it was a very different company. But Dusty Rhodes, as big of a star as he was, he never won the WWF World Title. There was a match he had in the late 70s against the then WWF champion superstar Billy Graham, where Dusty beat Billy Graham in a match by countout. But in wrestling, if you win a match by countout and it's a championship match, you don't win the championship. You win the match, but the champion remains the champion. So Dusty beat the champion by countout in this match, but he didn't win the title. Dusty took the championship belt and held it up, but then the referee had to take it away from Dusty because he didn't actually win the title. So Cody's story has been, all I want to do is to win the championship that they took away from my daddy. And God damn it, if that's not a story that anybody can understand, the son wants to do the thing that his daddy was never able to do. The son of a wrestler wants to win the championship that his father was never able to win. The championship that his father once came this close to winning, but didn't win. And he had the belt in his hands and they took it away from him. And now the son has come to claim the title. 40 years later, 45 years later. It's an awesome story. And there's an element of truth to it. There's a reality to it in the, the circus world of pro wrestling. So, that's why I love Cody. Cody's my favorite wrestler currently. There's other wrestlers from past generations I could talk about, but I feel like I've talked about wrestling enough for a while. But hopefully at least that gives you some understanding, of what I like about it, and specifically of what I like about Cody. Okay, I know there's some more super chats. 255 AD, I just had a deja vu. Whoa, please don't keep me in suspense. And another super chat from Isaiah Taylor. Some of the planets colonized by the Klingons start having revolts and revolutions, i.e. planets like Krios from the TNG show. Yeah, see, I like this. I like this. Dana, why has the song Stacy's Mom abruptly started running through my head? Is it because of the question Patron Aguirre asked? Maybe you just think Stacy's mom has got it going on. Steve Schmeling, because of you and the show Young Rock, I've started to get back into wrestling again. Are you familiar with the MSG incident? Oh, yes, yes. I am very familiar with the MSG incident, yes. There are few wrestling nerds from my generation who are not familiar with the MSG event, yeah. For those who don't know, Steve is talking about the MSG incident. What happened was in 1996, Razor Ramon and Diesel were two big top stars for the WWF, and their contracts had expired, and they were about to jump ship and go to WCW, the rival company. So their last match in Madison Square Garden, which was sort of WWF's home arena, their last Madison Square Garden show before they left, the main event was, I think it was it a tag team match? I know it was a steel cage match, but there was a match where it was between Diesel and Razor and Shawn Michaels and Triple H. And I can't remember who was on whose side and what the match was, but all four of them were involved. And they're all very close friends in real life, right? Although their friendship was never acknowledged on screen. Like they were friends backstage, but their characters, their gimmicks were not friends between the four of them on the show. But after the match, they kind of broke character and they all hugged each other in the middle of the ring, and then they posed on the four corners of the ring, you know, as like the last time the four of them would be all together for a long time, because Diesel and Razor were leaving to go to WCW. So at the time, among certain people in the wrestling business and also outside the wrestling business, this was viewed as an unconscionable breach of kayfabe, which is sort of the curtain that separates the real business of pro wrestling from the show that we see in the audience, right? They were sort of admitting that wrestling was a work, that it wasn't real. And these guys who were supposed to be enemies, who were supposed to hate each other, suddenly they're admitting that they're friends and they're giving each other a hug and they're posing together, you know? It was seen as like a huge scandal in certain circles. Nowadays, you look back at it, and the fact that anybody was angry about it seems quaint, you know, because now wrestlers, it's not done very often on TV, but it is frequently done like at live events after the TV show goes off the air, but the people are still in the ring and are still in the arena watching. Like wrestlers break kayfabe like that fairly regularly nowadays. But back then it was like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. It was an outrage. So yes, I am familiar with the MSG incident. 255 AD, sorry, it passed. I don't remember. Well, if you think of it, yes, some random geek, or as theater folks refer to it as the Presidium. Yeah, it's the suspension of disbelief. Kayfabe is kind of like, is the suspension of disbelief. It is the way the magician behaves on stage during his act. You know, it's not giving away how the tricks are done, sort of. Dana, it's not because of what you said about Bobert. And I wasn't even going to mention that. You had to bring that up. Steven's having trouble buying super chats. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry to hear that, but that one worked. 55 AD says, would you find it obnoxious if they made an Enterprise J show and the Federation fighting the Sphere Builders in the 26th century? I mean, it would really depend on the show. I mean, that's a deep enough cut that like I wouldn't feel like I was being assaulted by fan service. Um, I mean, I would still, as I always say, I would still prefer they just do something that we've never heard about before, just make up something new. Um, but the sphere builders thing was like a relatively minor detail in what season 3 of Enterprise, like the temporal Cold War stuff, the stuff that happened in the 26th century. Like I guess that wouldn't bother me as much as other things they could do, but I still prefer they just make up something new instead of revisit something. Um, John Burns question. Did you hear that Turkey voted unanimously to allow Finland to join NATO? Also, there's an arrest warrant out for Putin. Yes, I heard about both of these things. Putin apparently is wanted by the International Criminal Court, and Finland has been given the go ahead to join NATO. So go Finland. Good for Finland. Okay, yeah, Steve. Yeah, the match was Diesel versus Shawn Michaels, and then Razor and Triple H came out after. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, that was the basic gist of it. Baby faces and heels fraternizing in front of the fans. What's the world coming to? As Jim Cornette would say, you're exposing the fucking business. You're killing the goddamn wrestling business with your fucking bullshit. Brandon McDonald, if Picard doesn't have the Cisco bring a Voltron of Enterprises through the wormhole in the finale, then I just don't know where the show is headed. Are you in the writer's room? Todd Meyer, what about a temperate war? Oh, that's interesting. Like a war where nobody drinks? Could be interesting. 25580, would it have been better if the changelings kidnapped Kestra instead of Deanna? Like, I think that'd go with the theme about Riker and Picard fearing for their offspring. Yes, that's a good point. It would go more with the theme, but who gives a shit about Kestra? Kestra was in one episode of Picard in season 1. And it was the best episode. Like, it's a really good episode, but who gives a shit about Kestra? Who gives a shit about Riker and Troy's daughter that was in one episode? When you could, it's especially since they're doing the reunion gimmick and they haven't brought Troy into it yet. It makes much more sense to have it be Troy, and they set it up in episode 4 where Riker called her at the end, and they kind of reconciled. They had been kind of tense and estranged, but then he calls her and they have this nice moment between them where they kind of, they come back together emotionally at least. And then, there she is. She's being held hostage. Like, I think it makes a lot more sense dramatically for it to be Troy. But I do see your point about the theme of the offspring, definitely. Some random geek, can the International Criminal Court arrest and charge George W. Bush and Obama? That's an interesting question. I don't know if they can because the U.S. is not a signatory to the court. And I mean, is Russia? I don't know. I didn't know if Russia was or not. I honestly don't know. Dana Cole, excuse me. That's wrestling. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Dana. I meant to say wrestling. Here's that super chat from Stephen G. Clenard. Thank you, buddy. Look at that. Mwah. Appreciate you. How awesome would it be if the Uber villain giving Vadic orders turned out to be from an enemy faction from the temporal Cold War? That would be fitting with the overall theme of the show so far, I think, wouldn't it? So, I mean, it would be awesome in the sense that it would be an awesomely consistent creative choice. Also, does this give new meaning to the phrase talk to the hand? Indeed it does. Indeed it does. And John, I'm super excited about you getting to see the kids in the hall. You mentioned that before. That's really cool. That's really cool. Yannick Muller says, a trope that bugs me about legacy shows and movies is how characters always have to mention the name of the person that just enters the scene. I'm always like, yes, thank you. I know that's Data. I mean, I think there's probably got to be a better way to do it. I actually like the fact that legacy shows include enough exposition so that people who haven't been watching this shit nonstop for the last 30 years will be able to follow it and know who everybody is. Like, I do think that's important. But I also think as a writer, you have to find smoother ways of doing it other than having people just go, as you know, like every other sentence. You know what I mean? You need to find ways of filling people who haven't done the homework in so they can comprehend what's going on, but without being so obvious about it. You know, I mean, and so honestly, and in some situations you just can't avoid it. But I do think it's important to have it be accessible. You know, something napalm. Hi, buddy. What do you think about the latest turn in the AEW CM Punk drama? Hang on a second. 255 isn't expanding Kestra's character less fan service. And yes, it is, but it's also plucking a relatively unknown, relatively unestablished character, you know, that we haven't seen for 2 years and dropping her back into the show in a dramatically important moment. I think it plays much better to have the person that is being held hostage by the bad guys to put pressure on Riker be someone that not only we know better from TNG, but also someone who has been established in this season of the show. Like, we have an established Kestra in this season of the show. If you wanted it to be, I'll put it this way. If they wanted it to be Kestra that was being held as prisoner by Vadic instead of Deanna, then they should have established Kestra earlier in this season, like had her on screen doing something, and then bring her back for this. If they had done that, I think it would have been better. But to just bring Kestra back in that shot at the end of that episode for the first time since season 1 of Picard, I don't think that would work. And it's not a question of whether or not it's fan service. It's just, I just don't think that would have any weight dramatically compared to having it be Deanna. Okay, and yes, Steve, I would love to see an MST3K episode involving the Giant Claw. And all mod cons, do I think Trump will spend even a single night in jail? I don't think he will, regardless of potential multiple convictions. I mean, I would like to hope that he would, but I would never want to bet too much money on it. Now, sorry about that, Napalm. So, what do I think about the latest AEW CM Punk drama? I mean, I'm still completely on Punk's side. Like, I understand why he deleted that Instagram post. I understand why he thought better of it and decided, maybe maybe it was better just not to say that and not to stir people up, not make it any worse, right? But I'm still completely on his side. And I still think, like, people who are saying like, well, he should only come back if he apologizes to the Bucks and if he apologizes to Kenny. Like, I have long been in a place where I'm like, you know what? Fuck the Young Bucks and fuck Kenny Omega if they have a problem with it. Like, the biggest problem I have ever had with what Punk said during that press conference last year that started all this was that he picked the wrong forum to say it in. He said it in a way that basically put the company in a position where they had to side against him because of the way he said it and the way he said it, making the company look bad, right? But everything he said, I agree with. And everything he felt, I mean, I think maybe he should have let the Colt Cabana stuff go after all these years, but that's not me. That's not my life. It's him. He has his reasons for feeling however he feels. But everything he said about what had happened in the company up to that point, the stuff with Adam Page and the stuff with, the Bucks talking about him behind his back and all that shit. Like, I don't think any of that is implausible. I don't have any reason to believe that he's making that up or lying about that. And I'm completely on his side. The most shocking thing about it is that he said he'd never seen a Rocky movie. Like in the Instagram post, when he said that when Moxley pitched him the deal where he loses to Mox in the squash on TV before winning the title back on pay-per-view, like, and it was pitched as a Rocky 3 story, and Punk didn't get it because he'd never seen a Rocky movie. How have you never seen a fucking Rocky movie? How are you a pro wrestler and you've never seen a Rocky movie? That was the part that made me go, wait a minute, what? But other than that, like, yeah, you just said it in the chat. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird that it's weird that he's never seen a Rocky movie. Okay, 255 AD super chat. Was the wrestler actually the old guy's son or just acting? No, he really is. No, Cody really is Dusty Rhodes' son. Yes, that's not just a gimmick. He really is Dusty's son. Yeah. Geek has never seen a Rocky movie, but as Kane points out, Geek is not a pro wrestler. I mean, that's the thing is, like, the Rocky 3 story. Now, the way it was done in AEW in the story that is being referenced was very compressed. I think the problem that a lot of us had with it when we were watching it isn't so much that it was a bad idea, to have Punk come back and fight Moxley for the title and lose and then have to come back and win it in a rematch. Like, that's not a bad story, but they did that in the space of like 2 weeks. Like, it felt really, really compressed so that it didn't really play like I think they wanted it to. But the Rocky 3 story is a great pro wrestling angle, right? I mean, the champion kind of underestimates a rising challenger and gets his fucking ass whipped and loses his title and gets humiliated in a match, and then has to fight his way back, and build himself back up and face the challenge again and win the title back in the rematch. Like, that's a great pro wrestling story. So Rocky 3, I mean, I totally get the idea there. It was just so, Napalm, Cody's brother or half brother is Goldust or Dustin Rhodes. Also Dusty's real son and a fantastic wrestler. One of my all-time favorite wrestlers, Dustin Rhodes. Dana, why no handlebar mustache? Because I think it would certainly look flamboyant, but I also think it would look kind of dumb on me. So I don't think I would ever do that. John Burns, that's a good point. How are you someone who's never seen a Rocky movie? Steven Seagal didn't understand the concept of Hans and Franz, but that's Steven Seagal. I'm sure Steven Seagal doesn't understand quite a few concepts. Okay, so we're a little bit past 8. I know I took a little longer than I usually do for the patron and member questions, because I had so many wonderful questions from my patrons and my members this time. So I took a little longer getting through it, but I'm going to begin wrapping up the stream. So if anybody has any final questions, please get ready. Go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll do a final pass before I end the stream. But for now, I'm going to do my closing wrap up and plug all my stuff and remind everybody about my links and such, and then I'll answer some final questions, and then we'll call it a night. So first of all, don't forget, as some random geek just put in the chat, and as I saw him promoting earlier, charitylinks.page is where you can go if you want to help out some friends of ours who need a helping hand, financially speaking, who are needing some help, putting food on the table, paying rent, making ends meet. You go to charitylinks.page and you'll find links to people's PayPal accounts and GoFundMe pages and stuff like that. And if you have a few bucks to spare and you want to help out somebody in need, please consider doing that. Charitylinks.page. It's in the chat and it's linked in the description of this video. Also, don't forget, if you want to support my work, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, or becoming a channel member by clicking the join button right on this here YouTube page. If you become a patron or a member at any level of support, from $1 a month on up to whatever you feel like I'm worth and you can afford, One of the benefits you unlock is the ability to submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams. Patrons and members get to ask questions ahead of time that I answer in the first part of the show, as you saw if you were watching earlier. So patreon.com/Steve Shives, or click the join button to become a member to support this channel and help me to continue doing the work I do on YouTube. I really appreciate it. I could not do this without my patrons and my members. So thank you all so much. And thanks to all of you who are considering becoming supporters. And I hope you do. Also, don't forget, if you like my YouTube stuff, you can enjoy me on a couple of podcasts as well. There's Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I co-host along with the hilarious and wonderful and amazing Jason Harding, who I am also doing the reviews for Picard Season 3 with this year. Jason and I co-host Late Seating, the movie review podcast, where we take a look at classic films and see if they deserve their reputation, whether that reputation is good or bad. And today, our new episode of Late Seating just went up. It is our review of the classic 1974 film, The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Gene Hackman in perhaps the greatest performance of his magnificent career. Don't see our review. Listen to our review. Actually, if you become a patron of Let Me Listen podcast, you can see our review because we put up a video version of the podcast for patrons of that podcast. But if you just want to listen to it, you can listen to it at soundcloud.com/lemme-listen or at the links in the description. And also, don't forget the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I am on alongside Jason and the wonderful, talented, all-around amazing Dana Cole. We play low-ranking officers serving aboard a certain Federation starship in the 24th century. We are in our 5th season of the Ensign's Log, and we're nearing the end of the 5th season. We're going to record the new episode tomorrow. Jason and I think, are going to be doing kind of a marathon recording session, because first we're going to watch Picard and record our Picard review, and then by the time we're done with that, it'll be most likely close to time to invite Dana on to join us in the call and to record a new Ensign's Log. So we're recording that tomorrow, and that episode will then be out next week. But if you enjoy my Star Trek themed stuff, especially, I think you'll really dig the Ensign's Log. So check that out also at the Let Me Listen podcasts link on the screen or linked in the description. So that's it for the plugs. Let me go back to the live chat and catch up on some things that I've missed. I saw a couple of super chats pop in there that I didn't see. The Lady Eternal says, I haven't been able to watch WWE since they decided to write in Stephanie and Triple H's marriage by having him drug her for a drive-through marriage and non-con consummation. What was your breaking point with it? My breaking point when I stopped watching in 2016 was the election of Donald Trump, and then the picture of the McMahons in the White House after Trump took office. Actually, I think I stopped watching in 2016. I stopped watching after the election because Vince was a big Trump supporter, and I just said, I can't do this. I can't justify watching this anymore. And then when I saw that picture of all of them in the Oval Office after Trump was inaugurated, that was sort of confirmation for me, saying, oh, how, yeah, I made the right decision. So that was it for me. But yeah, the Triple H Stephanie marriage thing, I mean, extremely like, ooh, yeah, not cool. And John Burns with a super chat saying Russia isn't a signatory to the court, but South Africa is. And there's an upcoming meeting hosted in South Africa that Putin might not go to. It includes India, Brazil, and 2 other countries. Oh, interesting. Okay. Thank you for the info. Kane20C says you have to give up one, chocolate or peanut butter. At this point, I would give up chocolate because peanut butter has kind of become a staple of my diet. Like I eat peanut butter a lot. So I think I would have to give up chocolate, as much as it would pain me, because I love chocolate. Cast Iron Chaos, rock, paper, or scissors? Rock. Kind of a cheat, though, to do it this way, to do it asynchronously. Because, like, how could you ever lose if I go first? Todd Meyer, handlebar eyebrows? Perhaps. I didn't lay it on thick, Dana. I just said what was true. I just said true things about you. I embellished with Jason a little bit, but I like to build them up. Cast Iron Chaos, so after the 5th season, you can go into syndication. Yes, and then we finally get to make the big bucks. Yeah! That's what we're waiting on. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining me for the show this week. I will be back in 2 weeks for another one of these. Don't forget, there is no Trek Reluctantly stream next week because Dana will be out of town. So we'll see you for Trek Reluctantly again in 2 weeks, the same week as the next one of these, actually. So yeah, I just completely fell apart there at the end. Hope everybody had a good night, had a good show. Yes, you are late, Matthew. You're almost as late as you possibly can be. I'm wrapping up the show. I'm glad you made it anyway. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good night. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.